And science-based innovation, right? Let's talk about science-based innovation. Now, so when you read, newspapers, right? You often see, China is investing a lot of money in R&D, right? It's second largest in the world, pouring, more than 400 billion, right? And China accounts for 30 to 40% of global patent application. Yeah, so it's a huge amount of the research capacity, right, going on in China, right? But then somehow you still don't see globally competitive science-based companies in China, right? And why, right? Why?
It needs time.
It needs time, yeah.
It takes a lot of time.
It takes time. Yeah, it takes time. Yeah, so that's a very good point. It takes time. Yeah, so China has successfully built capacity, right? So quantity of science-based innovation, right? But then that quantity advantage has not been translated into quality advantage yet, right? So if you look at quality-related measures, right? Yes, China is number one in terms of the overall patent application, right? But then if you look at high quality patents, for example, we call it triadic patents, which is registered in 3 different offices, right? US and EU and in Japan, right? So it's actually quite small, right? And this number is lower than even South Korea, right? So therefore, right? So China will need to improve the quality of its science-based innovation, right? But then as you said, right, it'll take time, right? And then Chinese government is aware of this, right? So academia is also aware of this. They are trying to reform the system, right? Instead of giving incentive based upon quantity, right? So try to incentivize based upon quality, right? So that's the discussion that is going on, right? And then as China manage that transition, right? Greater emphasis on quality. There could be more and more interesting science-based innovation, right? Coming from China, right? And in the customer-focused innovation, we talked about the scale advantage, right? So the commercialization strength that China has. Similar strengths can be applied in science-based innovation as well, right? This is an example of incidence of certain disease, right? It's multiple times higher than other economies, right? Of course, it is a bad news to Chinese patients, right? But then it's an opportunity for researchers, right, and pharmaceutical companies, right, to do more drug development, more innovative drug development out of China, right, and then serve these patients better, right? And then once it works, they can take it globally, right? And that's why 7 out of top 10 global pharmaceutical companies are setting up their R&D centers in China, right, in Shanghai in particular, right? And there are some interesting experimentation going on, right? So this is a company called BGI. BGI, have you heard of it? Yeah, based in Shenzhen, right? Their ambition is basically to map the DNA of everything that is alive, right? And they hire thousands of PhDs and buy hundreds of equipment, right? So the Chinese approach, right, the scale driven approach, right, to do science-based innovation, right? If this attempt prove to be successful, right, so something interesting can be generated, right, from China, right? And also artificial intelligence, right? I would argue that artificial intelligence is also one interesting area, right? So where China can have strengths, right? In particular, from the data and also so-called use case, right? Innovation needs to have use case, right? Because innovation needs to solve certain problem, and China have so many problems across the board, right? So that means lots of commercialization opportunities by using those innovation, right? And this is a partly joke, right? Can you recognize what this picture is? Yeah, so facial recognition, right? So this is, I think, Tiantan Gongyuan, the temple in Beijing. So the problem, the issue was toilet paper theft, right? People steal toilet paper, and they introduced, facial recognition system. So you have to, register your face and get this much toilet paper, use it. If it's not enough, then it's your problem, right? Then you have to wait, 7 or 9 more minutes, right, to get the second batch, right? So yeah, some interesting use case, right? And this one, can you recognize what this is? Yeah. So so in China there's also many lost child, right? Issues, right? And this was there was an event in Chongqing, I believe, right? Trying to match the lost the parents and the lost children, right? And as a parent, you submit the photo of your kid, right? 20 years ago, right? And so on, right? And then if you believe you are a lost child, right? Somehow your parents are not your real parents, right? Then you can also register in the website, right? And then this the Baidu engine, they predict how this 5-year-old girl grow to, evolve, right? The face would evolve, and then when this girl becomes 25 years old, it will be looking like this, right? And then they do matching, and then send a message to potential parents, right? And then there was actually several cases that the case actually the matching actually worked, right? And this lady found her daughter, I believe, right? Using this facial recognition and algorithm engines, right? So, and in the age of artificial intelligence, right, machine learning is critical. And in order to educate your machine learning, right, the data is critical, right? And in case of China, right, so there's abundant amount of data, and there will be many use cases, right? So therefore, something interesting can happen even in science-based innovation.